Imagine a vast network of trenches. They stretch for miles, weaving through the landscape like a giant, muddy labyrinth. These trenches are not just simple ditches, they are complex systems designed for survival and warfare. These trenches are not straight lines, they zigzag across the landscape. This zigzag pattern is intentional, meant to minimize the impact of enemy fire and to provide better protection for the soldiers within. The trenches are the front line of a war. Here, soldiers live, fight, and often die. The front line is a place of constant vigilance and tension, where every moment could be a matter of life and death. The trenches are meant to protect soldiers. They offer a shield against the relentless barrage of enemy fire, providing a semblance of safety in an otherwise perilous environment. They offer cover from enemy fire. The walls of the trenches absorb bullets and shrapnel, reducing the risk of injury and death for those taking refuge within. The space between enemy trenches is called no man's land. This barren expanse is littered with barbed wire, craters, and the remnants of battle, making it a deadly zone for anyone who dares to cross it. It is a dangerous place. No man's land is a testament to the brutality of war, where the ground itself seems to be a living entity, hostile to all who tread upon it. The trenches are dug into the earth. Soldiers use shovels and picks to carve out these defensive positions, often working under the cover of darkness to avoid enemy detection. They are about 6 to 8 feet deep. This depth is crucial, providing enough cover to protect soldiers from enemy fire while allowing them to move and operate within the trench. The sides of the trenches are supported by wood and sandbags. These reinforcements are essential to maintain the structural integrity of the trenches, preventing them from collapsing under the weight of the earth. This is to prevent collapse. Without these supports, the trenches would quickly become death traps, burying soldiers alive under tons of soil and debris. Life in the trenches was dull and terrifying. Soldiers spent their days doing routine tasks. They stood guard duty, they cleaned their weapons, they repaired the trenches. Food was scarce and often cold. Sleep was difficult. The trenches were infested with rats and lice. The constant threat of enemy attack loomed large. Soldiers wrote letters home. They read to pass the time. They told stories and jokes to keep their spirits up. Laughter was a precious commodity. The trenches were a nightmare. The air was thick with the stench of death. The ground was a quagmire of mud, blood, and waste. Disease was rampant. Trenchfoot was a constant threat. It was caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold conditions. It could lead to amputation. The lack of hygiene was appalling. Soldiers often went days without changing their clothes. The constant shelling and sniper fire created a climate of fear. Section 4. Scars on the Soul. The experience of trench warfare left deep psychological scars on the soldiers. The relentless bombardments, the constant threat of death, and the horrific sights they witnessed took a heavy toll on their mental health. Many suffered from what was then known as shell shock, a condition we now understand as a form of severe PTSD. The symptoms were debilitating and often misunderstood. We call this PTSD today. It manifests in various ways, including severe anxiety, flashbacks, and uncontrollable thoughts about the traumatic events. They had nightmares and flashbacks. These vivid recollections of the battlefield would often wake them in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat and terror. They were haunted by the memories of what they had seen and done. The faces of fallen comrades and the sounds of battle echoed in their minds long after the war had ended. Many turned to alcohol or drugs to cope. These substances provided a temporary escape from their pain, but often led to addiction and further complications. The constant fear and stress led to emotional breakdowns. The pressure of holding themselves together in the face of such overwhelming trauma was too much for many. Soldiers felt isolated and alone. The camaraderie of the battlefield was replaced by a profound sense of loneliness and alienation. They had difficulty reintegrating into civilian life after the war. The skills and experiences that kept them alive in the trenches were of little use in the peaceful world they returned to, leaving them feeling lost and out of place. Section 5. Eruptions of chaos. Battles were terrifying and chaotic. The battlefield was a place of constant turmoil where the clash of steel and the roar of explosions created a symphony of destruction. They usually began with an artillery barrage. These barrages were designed to weaken enemy defenses and create openings for advancing troops. The shelling could last for hours or even days. The relentless bombardment would shake the ground and shatter the nerves of those in the trenches. After the barrage, soldiers would climb out of their trenches. They prepared themselves for the next phase of the battle, knowing the dangers that lay ahead. They would go over the top into no man's land. This was the most perilous part of the assault, as they were exposed to enemy fire. There they faced machine gun fire, barbed wire and landmines. Casualties were extremely high. The landscape was a deadly maze of obstacles. Attacks often resulted in heavy losses. The cost of each advance was measured in lives lost and ground gained. The fighting was brutal and unforgiving. Soldiers had to summon every ounce of courage to continue the fight amidst the chaos. Few battles achieved any significant breakthroughs. The war often settled into a grim stalemate, with both sides suffering immense losses and gaining little ground.